Hello, good evening. In today's message, I want to talk about the inauguration of Donald Trump, which is going to happen on this Friday. I've already previously spoken about what I think are the possible implications of his presidency. And the basic worry that I have is that we are reaching a new situation, a new political model in the US, and it certainly has gotten much worse than it was previously. If you think that Washington is broken and Washington's system is entirely corrupt and doesn't serve the regular people, that would probably be true. However, we should think about how the election of Donald Trump makes the political situation and the landscape somewhat worse than what we found previously. Under the old system, we had what I would call a triangular relationship, whereby you had the politicians, the professional politicians, as the middleman. So we talk about mostly lawyers, trained lawyers, and they work all their lives in politics, um, and they earn, so to speak, a middle class income or upper middle class income. And on top of that, they have to raise millions of dollars in campaign contributions, depending on the type of office they seek. Senators more than congressmen and the House of Representatives, and federal politicians more than state politicians, and so forth. Um, and so they take the campaign money from these lobbyists, from these rich people, and they get a huge rate of return. So there's great study in political science researchers that shows that the biggest return on investment for business people does not come from investments in the human capital training or infrastructure or something like that, or research and technology. But it comes from investments in the members of Congress. I think 800% or so return um, comes from investments into um, Washington politicians, because whatever money, lobbying money that they gave, they get back $8 out of the dollar given. Usually tax breaks, or there's some other legal way, subsidy, or like a grant, or some patent or something like that, right? Um, no campaign money comes for free, and that of course suggests that our system, which we call lobbying in this country, which other people in other countries would perhaps call corruption. That has been the way how it worked. But the professional politicians, they would also have to get elected by the popular vote, and so they give the speeches, and they basically put a front for ordinary people, working people, etc. And they would have to promise a few things to basically benefit, uh, you know, regular people, the working people, etc. So that was under the traditional model of politics, and there's no exception to really to this. If we talk about, and at least in federal politics and state politics, we have business people like Rick Scott in Florida, for instance. He was some investor previously. Um, but for the most part, we had the professional politicians in place. They were upper middle class, and they were serving on both sides. Under the new model, what happens is that the billionaire ran himself for office. So that would basically cut out the middleman, um, and uh, and also he put all of his own friends in charge. Like for instance, the billionaire um, who was lobbying quite heavily in favor of privatizing the public education system in Michigan, Betsy DeVos, or Labor Secretary is a fast food chain CEO who is very much against unionization and against workers' rights, and thinks that workers are getting paid too much, so we should accelerate automation in the fast food sector and so forth. And then Scott Pruitt, the guy he appoints to the EPA, is very much had been leading litigation against the EPA to basically oppose different kinds of environmental regulation that's imposed on you know, companies that produce pollution. So example after example, you see people that are highly influential and probably against the public interest. But instead of them, you know, uh, standing at the back and controlling the politicians as puppets, um, they themselves decide to rule the government. So I like to use the metaphor that we have shifted from a system where uh, the, uh, the bandits would pay off the sheriff, right, to benefit the bandits, to now the bandits becoming the sheriffs. And yeah, given that this arrangement is the one that prevails, I think that we have reached very much so the next stage of politics, and we see already some indications of very negative policies that are coming down the pipe. If we take, for instance, um, the new Health Human Secretary, Tom Price, and he wants to repeal Obamacare as quick as possible. So, yeah, I mean, it's quite ironic. Donald Trump himself, he ran on the platform to drain the swamp, as he called it. But it turns out that he actually is part of the swamp, surprise, surprise, and will basically do everything that he can, and with his cabinet, to essentially loot the country even more. And I think the only um, positive message I think that we can get from it is that people will be even more upset about uh, the failure and the dysfunction in the Washington politics, and they are really yearning for better alternatives. Um, and the question, of course, is should we give President Trump the benefit of the doubt because he has not started office yet? Given that he has already made himself a very bad reputation, with different tweets, I would be enormously skeptical of making very very positive predictions. But to recap, I think that we are reaching qualitatively a new stage in U.S. Politics. I think it is moving full steam ahead into the oligarchic form of society that Bernie Sanders and a few other people have warned about. And I mean, I just saw in the Oxfam report, just came out today or yesterday, saying that it's not 62 people who own as much wealth as the bottom 3.6 billion, the bottom half of the world population, as it was predicted last year, but it's now 8 people. So it's eight faces, 8 individuals who own as much wealth as the bottom 3.6 billion people. So we have been, not just on the US level, which is already quite a worrisome trend, but we're seeing on a global basis the upward um, distribution of income and wealth. And yeah, there hasn't been any solutions to that. And Therefore, I think that the prospects for populist politics are better than they have been. And yeah, I mean, these are just some initial thoughts, and I would be glad to share more thoughts as they come up. Um, but as the Chinese like to say, we are living in interesting times.